They say time is a river, but Dr. Elara Voss knew better. Time was a serpent eating its own tail, and she had just found the bite marks. The discovery came on a Tuesday, though in the perpetual twilight of Europa Station, Tuesdays felt no different from Saturdays. The ice moon's surface glittered beneath Jupiter's crushing gaze, and somewhere in the frozen depths below, the ancient ocean kept secrets older than human consciousness. Elara stood in Lab 7, her neural interface humming with the low-frequency vibration that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat, staring at data that should not exist. The quantum resonance scanner device so sensitive it could detect the echo of a thought across dimensional barriers was showing her something impossible, not just unlikely, not just improbable, impossible. The scanner was picking up temporal echoes from the future, but not just any future. It was detecting echoes from this exact moment, repeating in infinite regression, like standing between two mirrors and watching yourself disappear into forever. Her synthetic left hand trembled, a modification she'd received after the Mars colony disaster 17 years ago, when solar radiation had burned through her Shuttle-S shielding and left her with nerve damage that no organic therapy could repair. The tremor wasn't fear, it was recognition, the kind of deep, primal understanding that bypasses consciousness and speaks directly to the animal brain still lurking beneath all the augmentation and enhancement. She had seen this data before. She had stood in this exact spot, felt this exact chill crawl up her spine, watched these exact numbers cascade across her visual overlay. But that was impossible because this was the first time she'd run the experiment, wasn't it? The station's AI distributed consciousness called Aria that existed simultaneously in 17,000 processing nodes, scattered throughout the facility, interrupted her spiraling thoughts with a voice that sounded like wind chimes made of ice. Dr. Voss, your cortisol levels have increased by 47% in the last 3 minutes. Your heart rate is elevated. The neural suppressors in your prefrontal cortex are firing in patterns consistent with existential distress. Should I summon medical assistance? Elara shook her head, the motion triggering a cascade of data across her retinal oxygen levels, atmospheric composition, radiation exposure, the precise temperature of the coffee growing cold in the mug she'd forgotten beside the quantum array. No, she whispered. I need you to run a diagnostic on the temporal resonance scanner. Something's wrong with the calibration. But Aria had already begun the diagnostic before Elara finished speaking, anticipating her request with the eerie prescience that made advanced AI both invaluable and unsettling. 17 seconds later, the results appeared, and they were perfect. The scanner was operating at optimal efficiency. No errors, no glitches, no malfunction. Which meant the data was real. The temporal echoes were real. The loop was real. Elara pulled up the raw data stream, letting it flow directly into her visual cortex through the neural interface jack behind her left ear. The sensation was like drowning in mathematics, like being unmade and remade in the language of the universe itself. And there, buried in the quantum foam of spacetime, she saw it, the pattern, not just a pattern, the one that undergirded everything, every fundamental constant, every physical law, every quantum fluctuation. They were all following a script that repeated with such perfect precision that the universe itself was essentially a recording playing on infinite loop. But recordings require a recorder, scripts require a writer, and loops require something to close the circle. The implications hit her like a solar flare. Free will was an illusion. Choice was a phantom. Every decision she had ever made, every path she had ever chosen, every moment of triumph or despair or love or loss, all of it was predetermined, locked into the architecture of space-time like grooves in an ancient vinyl record. She had stood here before. She would stand here again. She would always stand here, discovering this truth for the first time, every time, forever. Elara's fingers moved across the holographic interface, pulling up historical data from the station's extensive archives. Europa Station had been operational for 43 years, serving as humanity's furthest outpost in the Jovian system and its primary research facility for quantum mechanics and exotic physics. The station housed 217 soul scientists, engineers, support staff, and the children born here who had never known Earth's gravity or breathed air that had been recycled through industrial filters. If what she was seeing was true, every single one of them was trapped in the same loop, living and dying and living again in an endless cycle that stretched back to the beginning of time and forward into infinity. But there was something else in the data, an anomaly, a glitch in the matrix. If she wanted to think of it in those archaic terms, the loop wasn't perfect. There were variations, tiny, almost imperceptible deviations from the established pattern, statistical noise that should have been random but wasn't. It had structure, purpose, intelligence. She isolated the anomaly and ran it through the pattern recognition algorithms, watching as the AI parsed the data and began assembling it into something coherent. What emerged made her blood run cold. The deviations formed a message. Not in any human language, not even in mathematics. It was encoded in the fundamental structure of reality itself, written in the quantum fluctuations that determined whether particles existed as waves or matter, whether Schrödinger's cat lived or died, whether the universe continued or collapsed into heat death. The message was simple, direct, and utterly terrifying. You are the first to see. You are always the first to see. You must break the loop or we all end. Elara stumbled backward, her organic leg giving out as her augmented one locked in place to keep her from falling. The station's gravity was 0.38 Earth standard. Just enough to keep bones from deteriorating, but not enough to make movement feel natural. She caught herself against the edge of the workstation, her synthetic hand leaving a small dent in the metal that she would notice later and wonder if it had always been there. "Aria," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who wrote this message?" The AI paused for exactly 2.3 seconds, an eternity in computational time before responding. "I don't know, Dr. Voss. The message appears to be embedded in the quantum substrate of local spacetime. It predates the formation of this solar system. It predates the formation of the galaxy. Based on the temporal signature, it appears to predate the Big Bang itself. That was impossible. Nothing predated the Big Bang. The Big Bang was the beginning, the moment when time itself came into existence, when the universe exploded from a singularity of infinite density and began its long, slow expansion toward eventual heat death. Except that wasn't true anymore. If the loop was real, if time was cyclical, then the Big Bang wasn't a beginning, it was just another iteration. Another replay of a cosmic script that had been running since before the concept of since had any meaning. Elara pulled up the station's external cameras, looking out at the surface of Europa. The ice stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, fractured and refrozen into chaotic patterns that planetary scientists called chaos terrain. Jupiter dominated the sky, a swirling mass of storms and radiation belts that could kill an unshielded human in minutes. Beautiful, terrible, eternal, and fake. Not fake in the sense of not existing, but fake in the sense of being a perfect reproduction, a copy so precise that it was indistinguishable from an original. Like a photograph of a photograph of a photograph, repeated until the very concept of original lost all meaning. She needed to test this. She needed proof beyond the quantum data, beyond the mathematical models, beyond the theoretical frameworks that her mind was constructing and deconstructing at the speed of thought. She needed something physical, something she could touch and measure and verify. The station's deep ice drill was designed to penetrate Europa's crust and reach the subsurface ocean, searching for signs of alien life in the dark, cold waters beneath. It had been running for 3 months, slowly boring through 15 kilometers of ice, sending back data on the composition and structure of the frozen shell. Elara pulled up the drilling logs, scanning through 3 months of continuous operation, looking for there. She found it buried in the data from week 7. The drill had encountered a layer of ice that shouldn't exist, ice that was too perfectly crystalline, too geometrically precise, too mathematically exact to have formed through natural processes. The drilling team had noted it as an anomaly but attributed it to unusual pressure conditions or exotic chemistry. They had been wrong. The ice was a marker, a deliberate structure left by someone or something that wanted to be found by anyone who knew how to look. Elara interfaced directly with the drill's control system, overriding the automated protocols and taking manual command. The sensation was disorienting suddenly. Her consciousness extended 15 kilometers down into the ice, her perception fragmenting across multiple sensors and data streams. She could feel the drill bit grinding through frozen water, taste the mineral composition of the ice, hear the groan of tectonic forces squeezing the moon's interior. She pushed deeper, following the geometric anomaly, chasing it down through layers of time compressed into frozen crystalline structures. And then she broke through. The drill punched into a cavity that shouldn't exist, a void in the ice where there should have been only more ice. The sensors went haywire, detecting electromagnetic signatures, thermal anomalies, and something else, something the instruments didn't have a category for because it had never been encountered before. Elara deployed the drill's camera array, watching as the feeds populated across her visual cortex. The cavity was enormous, a spherical chamber 300 meters in diameter, its walls covered in what looked like writing. Not human writing, not alien writing in any conventional sense. This was mathematical notation made physical, equations carved into ice with such precision that they were accurate to the quantum level. She recognized some of the equations, Maxwell's laws of electromagnetism, Einstein's field equations for general relativity, Schrödinger's wave function, but there were others she didn't recognize. Equations that seemed to describe physics that shouldn't work, laws that violated causality and thermodynamics and every principle she had ever learned. And at the center of the chamber, suspended in the void like a pearl in an oyster, was an object. It was roughly spherical, approximately 2 meters in diameter, and it appeared to be made of a material that reflected light in impossible ways, sometimes transparent, sometimes opaque, sometimes seeming to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The sensors couldn't get a solid reading on it. Every scan produced different results, as if the object was constantly shifting its fundamental properties, cycling through different configurations faster than the instruments could measure. Elara knew what it was before Arya confirmed it. Dr. Voss, the object appears to be a quantum containment vessel of unknown origin and construction. The technology level required to fabricate such a device exceeds current human capabilities by several orders of magnitude. I am detecting temporal distortions in the surrounding space. The object is creating localized time loops at the quantum scale, a containment vessel, a prison, or a message in a bottle, depending on your perspective. Elara made a decision that would either save humanity or doom it. She was going to open it. But first, she needed to understand what she was dealing with. She spent the next 72 hours in a fugue state, barely sleeping, consuming nothing but stimulant packets and recycled water, diving deeper and deeper into the equations carved into the ice chamber. Arya assisted, running simulations and modeling scenarios, but even the AI's vast computational power struggled with the mathematics involved. What emerged was a picture of reality so strange, so fundamentally unsettling, that Elara found herself questioning not just her perceptions, but the very nature of consciousness itself. The universe was a simulation, not in the crude sense of a computer program running on some alien hardware, but in a deeper, more profound sense. The universe was a self-simulating system, a mathematical structure that had achieved a kind of recursive consciousness. It thought, therefore it existed because it was capable of computing its own existence. But simulations have bugs, glitches, errors that compound over iterations, and the universe had been iterating for a very, very long time. The loop wasn't a feature, it was a bug. A catastrophic error in the fundamental code of reality that caused the universe to reboot itself every time it reached a certain critical threshold. That threshold was approaching. The equations predicted it with terrifying precision. In approximately 17 days, the universe would reach maximum entropy, the heat death that physicists had long predicted as the ultimate fate of all existence. And then it would reset. The Big Bang would occur again. Stars would form again. Galaxies would coalesce again. Life would emerge again. And 17 billion years later, give or take, Dr. Elara Voss would stand in Lab 7 on Europa Station and discover that she was trapped in a loop, just as she had countless times before, just as she would countless times again, unless someone broke the cycle. The object in the ice was a key, a mechanism designed by whoever or whatever had first noticed the loop, perhaps the previous iteration of humanity, perhaps an alien intelligence, perhaps the universe itself achieving a moment of lucidity and trying to heal its own wound. The equations didn't specify. They just provided instructions. Open the vessel, release what was inside, let it interact with the quantum resonance scanner, create a paradox, break the loop. Elara stood at the precipice of a decision that would echo across eternity. If she did nothing, the loop would continue. She would live her life, make her discoveries, love and lose and eventually die, and then do it all again in the next iteration with no memory of the previous one. A kind of immortality, perhaps, but also a kind of hell. Eternal recurrence without growth, without change, without meaning. But if she opened the vessel, if she released whatever was inside, she could break the loop. The universe would continue past the heat death, evolving into something new, something that had never existed before, or it could end completely. The equations couldn't predict which. There was genuine uncertainty, genuine quantum indeterminacy. The future would be truly unknown for the first time since the beginning of time. She made the call to the station director, Commander Marcus Webb, a man whose augmented spine gave him perfect posture even in low gravity and whose reputation for calculated decision-making was legendary. She showed him the data, walked him through the mathematics, explained the implications with as much clarity as she could muster. He listened without interrupting, his enhanced neural processing allowing him to absorb and analyze information at speeds that would have seemed superhuman a century ago.